Today, we're going to be taking a look at Noah Lyles' block start by using the footage that he posted to his YouTube channel here recently with Ralph Mann and really going in depth into some of the concepts that they're talking about to give you a little bit more clarity on what it is that they're working on and some of the things that they're looking to improve, and also some of the things that he's doing really well within his block start. So we'll go ahead and get started right away. And there's a lot of terminology that I felt like they used within the video that could end up being kind of hard to interpret unless you really have a good understanding of coaching sprinters and track and field. And so I just wanted to, again, give a little bit more clarity on it. So this is one of the first ones that we see starting off. And you could see that they have marking here. So you could, to me, what this ends up being is some of the goals of distances that he's trying to get to. So this third step, he's trying to get down with that step there. And then fourth step, looks like they're trying to get him to get that step to be right there. 5, 6, 7, right? And then that would be where he wants to get his 7th step, that little line right there. And the reason I go into really 7 being the big one and also looking at the red cone is just because we could see that he ends up really getting specific into that within his diagnostics. So and this was an interesting part here, we'll go ahead and play this through, where he's talking about how the first 3 steps really want to be about being quick.
First 3 steps are just pure power quickness, and the next 4 steps are starting to lift and transition into the full speed.
So what we're seeing here, and this is what they kind of talked about, was that they have a kind of customized model that they made for Noah Lyles. And based off of this, they plug in a certain time that he's trying to get to and then a distance that he's kind of trying to cover based off of his biomechanics. Now they could see where is he within that position. So it looks like that his left foot is the yellow and then his right foot is more of like the purple color. And so you could see he's a little bit behind with the step there. And that's what they're essentially trying to do, is really showcase where he should be in comparison to where he is. And then it's almost like a race against himself. And then one of the main things that ends up being a kind of reoccurring theme of the video is this 7.2, 7.5, 7.1 number that they kind of are arguing about throughout the video. And it's hard to tell for sure exactly what that means. But one of the things that Ralph Mann talks about early on is that we want to be able to get to 10 meters in 7 steps. And he's talking about how, like Usain Bolt being 6'5", he's going to cover that a little bit quicker, where someone like Christian Coleman being a little bit shorter is going to cover that in a little bit more steps. And so since Noah Lyles 5'10" has some of the things that he has within his lower body, that he should be at the 10-meter mark in 7 steps. Well, when you look at it and kind of slow it down, you could really see that he's a little bit short of that 7-meter mark. So at first he started off at being at 7.5, and then they talked about him getting down to 7.2, and that's why he's way ahead. So to me, what that is that he's not quite at 7 steps in 10 meters, but he's at about 7.2 in comparison to a 7. Another thing that it could also be potentially would be, where is the model in comparison to him? So let's say that the model's at 7.2, so they have a certain time that they want to get to 10 meters at. So let's say they want to get there in about 1.9. Okay, that would be effective with the consideration of the reaction time as well. And so if, let's say, he is getting to the 7 steps at 10 meters, maybe the model is at 7.2, right? Or at 7.5. And so they're trying to chase getting to right when the model's at 7 steps, Noah Lyles is also at 7 steps. So it's either that or that Noah Lyles wants to get to that goal of 10 meters in 7 steps, but instead it's taking him 7.2 steps. So those would, to me, be what makes the most sense with that. And I thought that would be an important part to be able to clear up. Now, and I thought this was a great thing to talk about as well, where he's like saying that within the first 3 steps, they're spending 80% of the time with their feet on the ground, right? So they're really pushing that entire time, in comparison to when you're at top speed, you want to have the feet on the ground about 35% of the time. So you're not going through nearly as much pushing at that point. It's much more about ground contact in comparison to when you're building the speed. And what he was also saying is that within those first 3 steps, he gets to 70% of his top speed, which is, I think, a really good number there. So this is one of those time periods where they're arguing back and forth about where he's at with the steps. And then they also were saying that, one of his steps wasn't getting in the right place. And then he talked about here, I think this is a great cue, is closing the gap. What the closing the gap cue means, right? This is what he's saying. It's like, right, you got to close the gap. Okay. And so what that means is as you're starting here, when your foot's striking the ground, okay, so it's not going to be on that first step, but then from here, as this foot's striking the ground, you really want to have the knees be even, right? So that's the gap that he's talking about. You don't want to end up having one knee being really far back behind and the other one being way out in front. The closer you could have those knees being even as that foot's hitting the ground during the start, the better your start's going to be. So see how his knee's a little bit behind there? That's causing him to have more of the gap. So that's the close the gap cue that he was talking about. And we could see within his block start, he's doing a really good job with that ability to extend. And I think you can see he's doing a great job of reaching out here. Okay, so he's not necessarily getting too much upwards within that first motion. He's got his hips high, he's got the head low, and then that first motion is really a far push forward. And it looks to me like he's got a lot of distance from the block, right? Some of the people talk about how you want to be maybe a foot and a half or like 2 feet away from that first block, and it's hard to tell exactly how far he is here. But to me, he looks much more like 2.5 feet than he does 2 feet, right? So I would say he's definitely a little bit further than what would be 2 feet. Again, that's kind of an estimation there. And then this foot is probably like 3, right? So he's about 2.5 foot with that first foot and then 3 with the back foot. And then he's really using that additional length to really get himself to be able to go out with those steps. So that's what you have to be able to do if you're going to get a little more distance, is cover more within those steps, and then also doing a good job being able to get those hips up. So I think that's what Christian Coleman does a little bit better than Noah Lyles, is he does a good job of getting those hips up a little bit more, where Noah Lyles has those hips a little bit too far back. He's probably working on that to be able to improve it. And that makes it so then as this foot's landing, we can again see a little bit more of that gap within those feet, where we can see with Christian Coleman, he does a better job of getting that foot right through. This one's not a bad one here. Again, so you can see he's trying to get to this third step at this tape. He does a good job of being able to cover that there. This fourth step wants to be here. Okay, so he's not doing as good a job covering distance there. 5, 6, and then we can see 7. And to me, he's a little bit short. So that's why I say they're talking about 7.2, 7.3, all that type of stuff, because he's a little bit short of that 10-meter mark in 7 step. And again, we could see the model and then where he's at in comparison to the model. Looks like he's a little bit, his hips are a little bit in front, but it looks like, and his foot's a little bit in front, but then the model ends up kind of beating him from there. So he's like almost ahead of the model at the beginning, but then it ends up passing the model, and that's where they're kind of going back and forth. And the more I'm looking at this here, it looks like they are looking at more of that 3rd to 4th step. So it looks like within his 4th step, he's really not covering the distance that he needs to be at. This is going to be that 3rd step where it should be, and then this is going to be the 4th step. So within that 4th step, they're probably wanting him to be at a certain length, and he seems to be falling short of that. So it probably has something to do with that 4th step based off of what we're seeing right there. If that's the live kind of coverage of it, then that would end up being how much of a, how close he is to being able to cover the right distance, right? So maybe he needs to be at a certain length, right, within his first 4 steps. They're trying to get him closer to the 7 meters at a certain time. He wants to be at 7 meters, but instead of it taking him that certain time, it's taking him a little bit longer, which is why they're saying 7.2, 7.5, something like that. So that to me is what they're talking about and, really getting in depth into. And then they go into talking about 11.9 and 12 and 11.8 and all that. And what that is just meters per second. So within a certain time period, can you get to 11.9 meters per second, 12 meters per second? So when they're saying 12, it's can you get to 12 meters per second within that certain time period? And so that's what he ended up doing here is, essentially got to that place, or maybe 11.9, and they say, oh man, you can't beat my model, and I hate getting beat and everything like that. So what he was able to do, which is really impressive, is get to 12 meters per second and probably about 50 meters ish. It looks like maybe 40, somewhere within that kind of general range here. But he does such a great job, just to go more in depth into his mechanics and being able to see the differences within his ability to really maintain great heel position, right? So Ralph Mann shows the cameraman the book, and he's talking about what he's really doing a great job of, talking about Noah Lyles, and it really has to do with that low heel recovery. Okay, basically just saying you can't really get to the distances that you need to without having the ability to have low heel recovery, then getting that knee right up and down, and really using that as a way to effectively transition from kind of that start or block start into the top speed. So again, this is that fourth step, and I don't think he's getting the distance that they're looking him to be able to get to. So and when you watch Noah Lyles, I think what ends up standing out, and this is something that I've been working with people to be able to try to figure out, I think a little bit better, is I think there's a side of the body that ends up coming through a lot more effectively, a lot more efficiently, right? And so we could see with this right foot, he does a good job of coming straight up and through with this one. And then with the left, he's a little bit more off to the side. We could see it even more later on when he's doing these races here, these runs. So with the right side, we could see he's getting that knee right up, and then the left side, it's a little bit more kind of off to the side, really straight up with that knee right side, and then a little bit more kind of externally rotate or off to the side with the left side. And so to me, that ends up lending the opportunity to get a little bit more specific on how that can translate to the running technique. So to me, you can work a little bit more on getting, I think, one side having straight hip flexion and more of that vertical force, right? And so that right leg has better or more efficient hip flexion. You can get into this position a little bit quicker, so then that can impact where your hips are, right? So if your hips are falling back, then you want to find out which side you get more efficient hip flexion in, so then you can get to that position. Then from here, he's getting more extension down into the ground, where the left one, he's coming around a little bit more, and so then he can really create more of a horizontal force here. So now he's reaching and really pulling back and creating that horizontal force. He's a little bit slower with the timing of that left foot in terms of how it's striking the ground. It's not as quick, it's more of a length leg, right? So one side I think is a little bit of a quicker side. So this right side, he does a good job getting it up nice and quick and then right back down. Okay. Then that left side, he's a little bit more time, a little bit more length within that step to make it so then he can cover good distance there and effectively, I think, maintain a good push off within that right side, right? So you can get a really strong push off the right because you're getting a little bit more length out of the left, get that right knee up, strike the ground hard, get a good push, and then length on the left side. So I don't know if this is something that is 100% like a concept that everybody needs to apply to their running, and there's scientific backing that shows that this is just something that I kind of observed over a period of time by just working with a lot of athletes. And then even at the beginning, he does a thing with the hurdles. You could see his right leg, and this is more external rotation now. So his right leg, he's barely getting over the hurdle here, where his left leg, he's easily up and over. So he has better external rotation there. He's able to open up that left hip a lot more effectively, a lot easier. Where again, this right side is very a lot more tight, right? It's not as easy to get into that position within the right leg, but that right knee is still going to probably be able to get up more effectively when he's going forward. Okay, so if you have more range going to the side on one side, which would for him to be your left side, now that's going to end up being more of the length side because that hip's going to open up a little bit more effectively, where this right side doesn't open up as effectively. So you want to be quicker with being able to get the leg up, so then we can maintain having a good foot strike position. And again, this is a advanced, I think, concept, but there are some athletes that I know are looking to find the advanced philosophy when it comes to sprinting. And I think this is an important concept to be able to understand to hopefully help you get there. So I know I covered a lot of different things when it comes to sprinting and sprinting mechanics, and it could be an in-depth video. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you. But I think that it also gives you a great opportunity to see a little bit more about what some of the best athletes are working on and get more specific into what are some of the best athletes working on when it comes to their sprinting. And it seems like that device that Ralph Mann was using is really a great tool to make it so you can essentially race against yourself. So that's what he was working on, is to go in and win the national championship in both the 100 and the 200. Noah Lyles is being able to race himself and perfect some of the things within his body mechanics to be able to get there. And this video should be able to give a little bit more clarity around what it was that he was trying to achieve. So again, we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Appreciate Noah Lyles for posting this in the first place. I think this is really effective and very helpful for people to be able to see. Thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and we'll talk to you soon.